Hello Year 5 and welcome to your reading lesson for today. So I hope you got on well yesterday with your independent task. Hopefully you've managed to do some research about the basilisk because that's going to come up in our story today, okay? So today we're going to look at identifying new vocabulary and explaining the words in context, a little bit similar to like what we did on our Tuesday lesson. So we're going to identify the ambitious vocabulary in the text. We're going to look at words that you might not have come across before. And we're going to look at how they fit into the story. We're going to see if we can identify any figurative language in there, if there is any. We're going to use evidence from the text and support our answer. And as usual, we're going to see if we can identify synonyms, okay, for the different words. So it's going to be very much a vocab-based lesson again today. And we're going to use some of our Harry Potter pages that I've looked at to try and give us another example, okay? So first thing first, let's have a look at some vocabulary. Let's move my beautiful face. So on page 99, it says, until his tail became entangled in the thorny tendrils. Now I've used an example here of this picture, and if any of you have ever had these at home, a slinky. We might actually be using slinkies for our science topic this time, we'll see. But these used to drive my mum and dad insane. We used to drop them down the stairs and the dog used to run off with them, and they used to come back looking like this. Now you can see here that this is entangled. Entangled is a verb. When you entangle something, okay, it becomes entangled. It's a verb. It's 3 syllables, entangled, okay, and it's got that ed suffix on the end. Now, to define what it means, you can see from looking at the picture, it means to become twisted together. It can either be twisted together or it can be twisted into something, okay? So if you think about vines, like when you go to the rainforest and you think about the vines that get wrapped and entangled all the way around it, okay? They either get twisted together or they actually get twisted around or in something. So some synonyms there is to intertwine. When we intertwine something, it's almost when it like interlocks, okay? So like if you think about a chain becomes like interlocked in itself, and to intertwine means to move in and out. You could twist something or you could snarl something. Now the opposite of that is just going to be to disentangle it. Okay, there's no other proper way for it to describe it with any other antonyms. Okay, but that is what it means to become entangled. So if you imagine his tail became entangled in the thorny tendrils, that means that his tail's become all twisted and stuck into something else. Now, the other word that we're going to be looking at here is contaminated. Now, contaminated is an adjective that's describing something. And the sentence we're looking at is the cave being contaminated for hundreds of years, okay? Now, contaminated is a 5-syllable word, contaminated. Okay, now it's a past tense adjective here because we've got the ed suffix on the end. So you can contaminate something, so it's the verb, or something is contaminated, okay, and that changes it into an adjective. Now you can see here a picture. This is a big oil tanker. Now this is quite a common thing sometimes to see on the news, and it's awful when it happens. It completely ruins the wildlife, our water purity, the fish, the animals, everything that lives in the ocean. It's not good. Now when we contaminate something, you can see the oil here. There's been an oil spillage, and that oil has seeped out from that tank and is now within the ocean. So what it means to contaminate something, so that water is contaminated, it means to make something impure or dirty, okay? Now, it can mean to make something impure or dirty when you contaminate something. So I might touch a perfectly clean surface with my hands and contaminate it because I've got germy hands. Well, I don't have germy hands as such, but everyone's got some form of germs on the hand, no matter how clean they are. Or it means you can be exposed to a poisonous or polluting substance. So here, you would say here that it was contaminated with pollution, okay? That oil has polluted the water, it's contaminated it. It's made that lovely, nice sea water turn nasty and very chemical, okay, and dirty and poisonous. It kills the animals and the wildlife that lives in the ocean when there's an oil tanker spillage, okay? It's quite serious. So synonyms for that is for something to be diseased, it could be infected, or it could be polluted, like the oil. Now, the opposite of that is when something's very clean and sterile and pure. So you imagine when Mrs. Hobbs is cleaning around upstairs in year 6, she's not contaminating anything, she's cleaning it, she's making it sterile. You go into a theatre at a hospital, so the theatre is the operating room, everything in there is sterile, okay? It's perfectly clean, everyone wears gloves, nothing's touched from bare hands. If someone was to walk in and cough or sneeze in there without a mask on, they've contaminated the room, okay? They've made it dirty or impure, okay? So we're going to read through this today. I'm going to try and see if we can get this into one video today. So we've only got the 4 short pages. So same as usual, if you want to read it on your own, that's fine. If not, you can stay and you can listen to my beautiful voice. So chapter 13, the basilisk. Now for anyone that's done their research, you know that, and anyone that's watched Harry Potter, the Chamber of Secrets, a basilisk is almost like a mythical snake, okay? And they're very big, very large, very powerful, menacing snakes, okay? But they are mythical creatures. So Firedrake wasn't bothered about anything. He was fast asleep. Outside the sun burned down, growing hotter and hotter. But it was cool in the cavern, and the dragon was dreaming of mountains, of dwarves climbing up his tail, and of the dirty canal flowing through the great human city. Suddenly he raised his head. Something had roused him from his sleep, so woken him up. A horrible stink rose to his nostrils, washing over him like the dirty water in his dream just now. Outside the mouth of the cave, the leaves of the thorn bush went limp and drooped. The dragon sat up uneasily. We know uneasy means, not sure, very cautious, and he listened. A hiss came out of the crevice in the darkest corner of the cavern. Feathers rustled, claws scraped over the stony ground, and suddenly the most monstrous creature Frederick had ever seen emerged from the darkness. It looked like a gigantic cockerel with yellow feathers and broad spiky wings. The monster's staring eyes were blood red, and it wore a circlet of pale spines like a crown on its horrible head. Now we know circlet's almost like a circle. Its tail coiled like the scaly body of a snail. So when it coils, it sort of wraps itself around in a spiral. A body of a snake, and ended in a claw, which was as snatching as invisible prey. The monster stalked slowly towards Firedrake. The dragon could scarcely breathe, so hardly breathe. The dreadful stench was making his head swim, and he retreated until his tail became entangled in the thorny tendrils outside the cave. "Ah, you woke me," croaked this ghastly creature. "A dragon? A fireworm! Your sickly sea-sweet smell made its way into my darkest dreams and disturbed them. What are you doing here in my cavern?" Firedrake wrenched his tail free of the thorns, it means to pull, to tug really hard, and took a step towards the monster. The stink surrounding it still made it difficult to breathe, but he was no longer frightened of the strange creature's horrible appearance. "I didn't know this cavern was yours," he replied. "Forgive me, but if you don't mind, I'd like to stay here until nightfall. I don't know where else to hide from human beings." "Human beings?" hissed the monster. It opened its curved beak and laughed. "You took refuge from human beings in my cave? Well, that's a good one. That's a really good one." Firedrake looked curiously at the ugly cockerel-headed creature. "What are you?" he asked. "I've never heard of anything like you before." With a shrill cackle, the monster spread its spiny wings. Dead beetles and spiders dropped out of its plumage. So plumage or plumage, that's like the feathers around sort of the belly of like a bird or a creature that's got wings. "Don't you know my name?" it screeched. "Don't you know my name, Fireworm? I am the worst nightmare in the world, and you have woken me from my sleep. You are the light, but I am the deepest darkness, and I shall swallow you up. The two of us cannot be in the same place, any more than night and day can ever exist together." Firedrake stood there as if rooted to the ground. He tried to move. He wanted to breathe dragon fire and drive the horrible cockerel-headed creature back into the crevice in the rock from which it had crawled, but he simply could not move at all. The monster's eyes began to flash, and the spines on its head quivered. So quivered means to shake. "Look at me, Fireworm," whispered the yellow monster. "Look deep into my eyes." Firedrake wanted to turn away, but those red eyes held him spellbound. What does it mean by spellbound? You know what it means? If someone's spellbound, you're almost like in trance. When you're hooked under a spell, you're in somebody else's control. So that eyes is almost like hypnotized him. They were filling his head with black fog that was smothering everything he knew. Suddenly, a sharp pain roused him from the daze. Someone had trodden on his tail hard. Firedrake whipped around and saw a man standing in the cave entrance. A man as thin as a rake and wearing shorts. He was holding a large round mirror high above his head. Firedrake heard the monster behind him beat its wing. "Move aside, dragon," the man called. "Quick, move aside, and don't look at it if you value your life." "No, look at me, Fireworm," screeched the cockerel-headed monster, lashing the rocks with its snaky tail. "Look at me." But Firedrake looked at the man instead, stepped aside, and the monster saw its own reflection. It uttered a shriek so terrible that the sound echoed in Firedrake's ears for days to come. Then it flapped its wings until the entire floor of the cavern was covered with poison yellow feathers, puffed itself up so the spines on its head touched the roof of the cavern, and burst into 1,000 pieces. Incredulously, so shocked, baffled, amazed, Firedrake looked at the place where the monster had been standing. The man beside him, exhausted, lowered the mirror. "My word, that was a close shave," he sighed, propping the mirror against the cave wall. Firedrake, still dazed, stood staring at the remains of the monster. Nothing was left of it but feathers and stinking dust. The man cleared his throat and cautiously approached the dragon. "May I introduce myself?" He bowed slightly. "Barnabas Greenbloom, Professor of Archaeology, special subject, fantastic phenomena of every kind. It's an honour to make your acquaintance." Firedrake nodded. He still felt numb. "May I ask you," Barnabas Greenbloom continued, "to breathe a little dragon fire over the remains of that terrible creature? It's the only way we can prevent the cave from being contaminated for hundreds of years." What's more, he added, holding his large nose, it would get rid of this disgusting smell. Firedrake was still staring at the man in some amazement, but he did what he asked. When he breathed blue fire on the monster's remains, they crumbled into a fine silver dust that filled the whole cavern with glittering lights. Ah, cried the professor, doesn't that look wonderful? Yet again, we can see that beauty can arise from the worst of horrors. Wouldn't you agree? Firedrake nodded. What sort of creature was it? He asked. That, said Barnabas Greenbloom, sitting on the rock and mopping his brow, that, my friend, was a basilisk. So obviously one of our snakes. A fabulous creature like yourself, but one of the more sinister kinds. A sinister, nasty, evil. A basilisk, the dragon shook his head. Never heard of such a thing. Fortunately, such monsters are very, very rare, explained the professor. The mere sound of their voices or one glance from their terrible eyes is usually enough to kill. In your place, any mortal would be dead now, but even a basilisk can't destroy a dragon so easily. Okay, so you're going to have a go at doing some questions based on that part of our video. So, I've left the answer up on here, unfortunately. So look at the paragraph beginning. It was on the corner of a street. So you've got this slip in front of you at home, okay? What I want you to do is I want you to pause it and just have a quick read of it. Okay, so it says find and copy one word that means strange. Okay, now unfortunately I've left the answer up on there for you to see, but that's fine because I'll explain to you how I know that it was peculiar. So we're looking for something that was strange. So it was on the corner of the street that he noticed the first sign of something peculiar. So I'm going to think, well, what was it he noticed? Well, he noticed a cat reading a map. So I'm thinking, well, how does it feel to see a cat reading a map? Well, that's a very strange thing to do. Now, that's something that's very strange. So I've found the word something, and it says here something peculiar. Okay, so the answer to that question there is peculiar. When something is peculiar, odd, or strange, it means that it's strange. Okay, so that was a nice easy one because I gave you the answer for that one. So this time around, let's have a go at doing this one. So I'm going to talk you through it, and then I want you to try and work out the correct answer. So Mr. Dursley was enraged that the couple of them weren't young at all. Okay, so that comes from that little extract here. So what I want you to do is just need to pause the video and just read that extract there. Okay, so which word is the closest in meaning to enraged? Okay, we need to tick one. Okay, so I'm going to think to myself, like we did last time, before I even think about finding this word, can I see if I can eliminate some of them? Okay, so I've got less options to choose from. Now I'm looking at the confused, furious, unsure, and cross. I'm looking at the word enraged. Can anyone see the root word that we can get from enraged? Yeah, I can see the word rage. What does it mean to rage? It means to be angry, doesn't it? So we know it can't be confused because that's got nothing to do with being angry, and we know it's not going to be unsure, but it could be either furious or cross. Okay, so let's find it in the text that Mr. Dursley was enraged to see that a couple of them weren't young at all. Why that man had to be older than he was, wearing an emerald green cloak. The nerve of him. When you say that someone has the nerve to do something, that's almost like they have the cheek, the audacity. Like you can't believe they actually think that they're able to go and do that, and they think that that's appropriate. So I'm now thinking to myself, if he's outraged at something or he's enraged, that's more than just being cross. Okay, when you're raging at something, that means you're very, very angry. So I'm looking for a word similar to being angry. So I could be cross, but angry is almost taking that to another level. And I think that means that's the word furious. So I'm going to tick furious in that box. So sometimes you have to use some of your own general knowledge that's going to help you to answer some of these questions. Okay, now I flew through that lesson because we've done a lot of vocab work this week. And I know that you've done some of your own vocabulary work at home as well. So I'm going to mix the questions up a little bit today to test you to see how well you've noticed, you focus when we've looked at the vocab questions. So I want you to have a go at completing the questions based on pages 98 to 101 that we've looked at today. If you have printed it and you do have a copy of it, remember to highlight the keywords in the questions and highlight the evidence in the text because that's going to help you and that's going to help support your answers. Okay, so have a go at doing those questions. Okay, and then tomorrow you're going to have an independent task where you're going to be doing something else, and it will be a whole host of questions across all the different topics that we've looked at. Okay, so have a go and see how you get on. All right, good luck, year 5.